Today I want to talk to you guys about what makes a crop profitable. There's 5 characteristics that I outline in my book, and if you want to follow along, you can go to page 20, and I'm going to talk about why these are so important. You know, there are probably more characteristics out there that make a crop profitable. In fact, I know there are things like how long does it take to harvest, how do you pack it, other things like this. You know, we could make this list a lot longer, but I find these 5 are, at least in my experience, the most important. So let's get into it. So these are certainly in no order of importance. They are all important. One thing I will say, which is the one we're going to talk about at the end, is popularity. If a crop isn't popular and nobody wants it, none of these characteristics matter, okay? So we're gonna start with the beginning of the list according to what's in my book. The first one is shorter days to maturity. So if you look in your seed catalog and you see a number that says DTM, that means days to maturity. So what that really is, that number represents the average days from seed to harvest of that crop. And so by average, it's really looking at during the main season. So you might see on a packet of seeds, it'll say Nantes carrots, 76 days to maturity, 76 GTM. That means that if you plant those in the main season, being the late spring to summer, that crop will be 76 days to maturity. However, if you plant that crop the 1st of April in a climate like I'm in, it won't be 76 days to maturity. It'll probably be 85 to 90. And that's because there's variation on the day length at the beginning and the end of the season. Well, there's always variation on the day length. If you live on planet Earth, it's always slightly shifting unless you're closer to the equator where it more or less stays the same. But for those of us in the northern and southern hemisphere, these days change. So that aside, days to maturity are important because the faster a crop is in and out of the ground means that you can get another crop in there. So all of these 5 characteristics we're going to talk about, we're looking for a score on that characteristic. So we have 5 things and we're going to rate them whether this crop that you're looking at or you're interested in looking at is a yes or no. So the first one being days to maturity. Can this crop be grown in 60 days or less? If it can, it's a yes. It scores a check. If no, that doesn't necessarily mean I won't grow it. It just means that it doesn't score here. And what I will say about all these 5 characteristics is that on the smaller the land base you go, you want to have more of these characteristics, whereas on the larger the land base you are, you can have less because you might need to have more variety to move more volume of product. So the first one again, days to maturity. If you can grow it in 60 days or less, it scores a yes here. So these are things like radishes, 28 days on average to maturity. Arugula, 30 days to maturity. Spinach, maybe 40 days to maturity, depending on the season. But on average, a lot of these types of crops will grow less. So in my own personal experience on my farm, because I'm on such a tiny land base, I pretty much only grow crops that have shorter days to maturity. The one exception for that on my farm would be tomatoes, whereas they're transplanted and then there's a period of time where they're not in production. However, I have ways of interplanting that allow me to keep production out of my greenhouses while those tomatoes are in the ground. So I've found a way around it, and there's other cases like that. So anyways, days to maturity, if you can grow it in 60 days or less, you score a yes here. Okay, the next one is yield per linear foot. So I grow in typically 30-inch wide beds, and I've standardized my farming system to follow that, except for cases where this funny bed in my greenhouse or microgreen flats, things like this that are slightly different. But on average, most of my beds are 30 inches. So what I'm looking for is a high yield per linear foot of bed. So meaning 1 foot of a bed will yield at least half a pound of product. So something like one of my high value crops that doesn't always yield that is arugula. So it wouldn't score here. It can in some cases, but some varieties of arugula don't score that. So that doesn't mean I won't grow it. It just means that it doesn't score the criteria here. So an example of a high yield per linear foot would be something like Salanova lettuce. I actually get 1 pound per linear foot. So that scores there, where something like arugula might not. So again, doesn't mean I won't grow it, it just means that it doesn't meet this criteria. And once we go through this whole list, you'll have an idea of how this will play out. So high yield per square foot or per linear foot is a 1/2 pound per foot of bed or more. You would score a yes on that one. You know, another example of something that is a low score per linear foot would be something like winter squash. You know, it takes a long time to grow and all this, and it's really spread out, so you get a very low yield per linear foot of a bed. Another example of a very high yielding crop per linear foot would be spinach. I planted at 5 rows and 30-inch bed, and I get sometimes up to 2 feet per linear foot, so very high yielding. And so that's what you're targeting overall if you're on a small land base. But again, you don't have to follow this. Once you go through this list, this will all make more sense to you. Okay, the next one on the list is high price per pound. I'm looking for $4 per pound or more. So again, it doesn't mean I won't grow something if it isn't $4 a pound or more. It just means that it won't score on that criteria. So all of my greens, all my loose leaf greens, are at least $4 a pound or more. Most of them usually start around $6. Many of them go up to as much as $20 a pound in the case of microgreens. So some things like heirloom tomatoes, larger tomatoes, I don't sell for more than $4 a pound, so they wouldn't score here. Any type of squash generally doesn't score there. If you can get the really small patty pan summer squash, you can sell it for $4 a pound, so it would score there. So again, doesn't mean I won't grow it if it doesn't score there. It just means that, you know, you're going to look at it as an overall picture a little bit differently. So generally speaking, on a small farm, we want to target things that we can sell at a higher price per pound. Like there's not a lot of economics in, if I was on 1/3 of an acre like I am now and I was a potato farmer, that's not really going to be a sustainable crop for me to grow based on my land size. Whereas on larger farms, you can have lower prices per pound because you might mechanize things and you can cater to a large volume audience. Whereas, you know, growing potatoes on a tiny farm, there's not much of a business model in that, unless of course you're not in the business of making money and you're doing other things, and that's totally okay and that's totally fine. But when we're talking about the profitability of a farm, we really have to look at the price point of the product that we're selling. Okay, the fourth one is long harvest period. So we're looking at 4 months or more of a period of time that we can harvest a particular crop. You can look at this in 2 ways. You can either look at it like, I want to grow a crop that I can plant and replant multiple times throughout the season. So in the case of lettuce or radishes or arugula, I can plant and replant those crops for most of the season, like at least 8 months of the season, and probably the same for most North Americans. Whereas something like an heirloom tomato really only has a short harvest period. And the reason I use harvest period is important is because all that really matters in the production of a crop is when you're harvesting it. When it's put in the ground and it's just growing, it's not doing anything for you. It's when it's harvesting that it's producing revenue and production for you. So the harvest period is how long you can be harvesting that crop. So there are tomatoes that do have a long harvesting period, and those are the ones that I actually particularly prefer to grow. So indeterminate cherry tomatoes will have a production period of a longer span of time, whereas something like a beefsteak tomato, your sort of garden variety tomato that you'd put in the ground, you might plant it in May and you won't see any fruit on it until August, and you might pick it for a month and a half. Whereas a cherry tomato you can put in the ground as early as April if you've got it in a greenhouse, and it'll be fruiting by June, and you'll pick it June, July, August, September, even into October, so you can potentially have a longer harvest period there. So again, it doesn't mean that I won't grow a crop if it doesn't meet that criteria. It just means that it doesn't score here, and again, when we get the overall picture, you'll see how this plays out. Okay, the fifth one, and perhaps the most important one, is popularity. If a crop isn't popular or if it's not in demand, there's no point in growing it. If you're in the business to make a living at this, growing crops that nobody wants is a losing battle, and it's a fast way to go out of business and burn out. So really, popularity of a crop is the thing that encompasses all of these. It's really the dead stop. It's really what you should ask yourself at first. Is this crop or product in demand? Do people want it? Do they want to pay for it? How much of it do they want? If they don't, then there's no point of growing it. Stop there, because it can have a high value, a short date of maturity, a long harvest period, and a high yield per linear foot. But if nobody wants it, you can grow it till you're blue in the face, but you're just going to be wasting product and wasting time. So really, popularity is the most important. And there are ways that you can change the popularity of a crop. I've certainly done it in my career farming. When I started growing microgreens, nobody was doing them at the farmer's market. Yes, there was people selling them to restaurants, but it wasn't a thing people were doing at the farmer's market. I introduced them slowly and started to get interest in them and was able to scale it and grow more. But it takes time, and it can be risky because you're bringing product to a market, or growing it with the anticipation of it being sold somewhere else, and it doesn't sell, well, then you're losing money. So you can make things popular, but the best way to do it, which would be my sort of word of caution, is do it carefully, do it incrementally, lower your exposure to failure so that you can fail a little bit and then learn and then readjust and then introduce it back. Just to reiterate those: days to maturity, high yield per linear foot, high price, long harvest period, and popularity. Those are the 5 characteristics that make up what I call the crop value rating, or the CVR. So what I want you guys to do is make a list of all the things that you grow or you want to grow, or that you think you would like to grow in a best case scenario. Make a list of all those crops and then put them through the ringer. Put them through these characteristics and then grade all of them. So you might, and it's going to be different for everybody. Like in my book, I do list how all of these rate for me. And even in the last 2 years since I've written my book, it's slightly changed. Like some crops change. This is a dynamic rating system, and it'll always change for you. So it's good to stay on top of it and reevaluate all the things that you're growing. So make your list. It might be 80 vegetables, and go through and ask all these characteristics of each of these crops and rate them. So put it in a spreadsheet, make a list, and then have a separate column that has your CVR rating, and you'll have 3 out of 5, 2 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5, so on and so forth. Once you have that list, resort it by the grade. So go on the top of your spreadsheet and just click Sort Ascending, and you'll have all of your high rating scores come to the top and all your low rating scores go to the bottom. And what I want you to do is evaluate and ask yourself the tough questions. All those crops on the bottom, do you really like growing those? How much of a hassle are they to grow? And if you're going to keep farming, is it worth growing them if you're not making money? And the thing that you will find, or at least that I have found, is that on a smaller land base, it's better off growing crops that have a high CVR than if you're on a larger land base. The reason being, on a small land base, in order to streamline your production, you need to specialize more. So it's just essentially what I've done on my farm. I'm still on 1/3 of an acre. I have been for 3 years, and my farm is the most profitable it's ever been, and this year is even more of a record. I'll wait to share those numbers with you guys to see how much the government steals from me, but that's a discussion for another time. But go through that list and really ask yourself the hard questions. Is this stuff worth growing if it's not making me money? And it might be, and that's totally okay, because some of us aren't farming to make ends meet. Some of us have day jobs, some of us do other things, and growing for us there's other motivations there, and that's totally okay. But I did this in my 4th year of farming. I was growing 80 vegetables that year, and there was about 2.5 acres of land in production. And I put all this stuff in a list at the end of the season, and I found that there was about 10% of what we were growing that was making the lion's share of income on our farm. And those crops were grown on a 1/4 acre of land. So on a 1/10 of the land, 10 crops was making the lion's share of income for the farm. And so that's the year that I really asked myself, is it worth growing this stuff? I mean, yes, I want to grow all these vegetables, and yes, I want to feed everybody, and yes, I want to save the world. But if I burn out doing so, and that leads me to quit farming, well, then nobody wins, right? You need to make a living at this. You need to be happy. You need to enjoy your life, right? That's what this is all about. Yes, we can make money doing this. Yes, we can, have a huge farm. But if you burn out, then nobody wins. And so that's really what's most important here. It's important to be profitable, but at the end of the day, you got to be happy and you got to enjoy what you're doing. Otherwise, what's the point? So anyways, guys, I hope that has helped. This is something that is, when I'm consulting for people, it's usually the first thing I look at is like, let's look at your crops. Let's look at what's most valuable. So if you guys want to see more stuff like that, please hit the subscribe button right now. Like and share these videos with your friends. And if you haven't read my book yet, get it. You can get it at my website if you want to support me at theurbanfarmer.co/book. And on my website, I've got other things, links to my online courses and so on and so forth. And I really appreciate your guys' support with all of this. And we'll see you next time.